Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 244 based on novel. So let's start. After gaining his second soul core, Elder Xian did not only find his abilities greatly enhanced, but also saw the true powerful effects of a second soul core. The enhancement did not just stop at the compression of soul power, but it also increased his potential to new heights. Elder Xian was thinking about the possibilities Hui Yuhao would unlock if he were to successfully form his third soul core when he became an ultimate dueler rank after perfecting his second soul core. When that happened, Hui Yuhao would truly become one of the most outstanding soul masters ever. At the same time, he would definitely be able to overcome the limits imposed by this world. Even if he were not able to inherit a godly seat, he should be freed from the restrictions at rank 99 once he formed his third soul core. At the end of the day, all of the above were just guesses made by Elder Xian. However, those guesses were what he hoped Hui Yuhao could achieve. Of course, he knew how hard forming the third soul core would be after experiencing the challenge of forming his second soul core. Yuhao? Do you really have to push yourself so hard to become stronger? Was this really what Hui Yuhao had planned? No, it was not entirely true. Just as Elder Xian had accurately predicted, Hui Yuhao already had a complete plan. Improving himself was indeed one of the important parts of the plan. However, he did not intend to put his life on the line just to force some sort of breakthrough. Instead, he wanted to gain a better understanding of the new abilities he had just acquired by fighting in a life-and-death situation. It had already been a few days since he had formed his second soul core with the yin-yang complement technique. However, he still had not fully understood the capabilities of his second soul core. By forcing himself to fight with powerful cultivators, he would be able to understand the intricacies behind his second soul core as soon as possible. He was the second being in the world to possess a second soul core formed from the yin-yang complement technique. The first being was the beast god. Even though Dai Qian was able to take on human form, he was ultimately a soul beast. Hui Yuhao was indisputably the first human to form his second soul core with the yin-yang complement technique. Hence, no one could teach him how to use his second soul core, or how powerful his second soul core actually was. Hence, he had to explore all of these by himself. If Hui Yuhao had enough time, he would definitely have chosen to explore its capabilities in a more rigorous and slower manner. That would be the ideal way to prepare himself to take on the challenge to become a god in the future. However, time was definitely a luxury for him now. Hence, he had no choice but to agitate his body with battles to see what capabilities he now possessed after forming his second soul core. It was the fastest way for him to accurately determine how much power he possessed. The greater the adversity, the more potential he could try to squeeze from his body. This was something he had learned when he had first participated in the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament. Compared to back then, his powers and abilities had grown exponentially. However, Hui Yuhao still believed that putting oneself under immense pressure was the best way to learn more about one's abilities regardless of one's current standing. Very soon, 2 hours passed, and it was almost time for the battle. Neat contingents of troops started to move out from the Sun Moon Empire camp. There were not many people who left their military camp. There were less than 1,000 people in total. However, all of them were soul engineers who were fully armed. They had activated their linked defensive barriers as they started to head towards Hui Yuhao, who was roughly 22 kilometers away from them. These contingents were surrounding a group of powerful individuals from the Sun Moon Empire. Shrek City also opened their gates. Even though Hui Yuhao had seemed to cut off his connections with the academy, Elder Xian had his own reasons for dispatching some of his forces. After all, it was not possible for the academy to sit and wait as the Sun Moon Empire's soul engineers advanced closer to the city. Shrek City seemed to have only sent soul masters into the air. In fact, they sent more than 1,000 soul masters who were all at least soul sages into the air. The ones who were flying at the front of this contingent were the elders of the Sea God's Pavilion and the elite cultivators from the three empires. None of them held any bad feelings towards Hui Yuhao because they could not even hear what he had said to the Sun Moon Empire army. Elder Xian only informed them of how Hui Yuhao had planned to take on 10 different individuals to solve their current predicament. Hui Yuhao was a hero in everyone's eyes. The way both parties sent out a force of close to 1,000 individuals towards the battleground made it seem as though everything had been planned in advance. If the battle was conducted in a one-on-one fashion, the Sun Moon Empire would have no chance of beating Shrek Academy even if they were to double the number of people they had. However, this was ultimately war. In a battle which included soul engineers, concepts about one-on-one battles were non-existent. Elder Xian brought his group of people to a position which was roughly 500 meters from Hui Yuhao before stopping. He also did not allow anyone to go over and interact with him. All they did was line themselves up and watch the upcoming battle silently. At this crucial moment, Elder Xian did not wish for anyone to disturb Hui Yuhao. The Sun Moon Empire troops also stopped 500 meters away from Hui Yuhao. This meant that they were about 1,000 meters away from Elder Xian and the powerful cultivators of Shrek Academy. A distance of a single kilometer separated both parties. A battle which would definitely go down in history as one of the most important battles in the world of Soul Masters was about to take place in the space between these parties. Zhu Zi was still looking brilliant as ever in her armor. After her subordinate brought a huge chair over, she sat down in the chair as she gazed at Hui Yuhao. As the commander of the 3 armies, she was the only person here who was qualified to sit down. Even Zhongli Wu, the military supervisor, was not entitled to do so. Zhongli Wu stared coldly at Hui Yuhao as a light flickered in his eyes. It was unclear what was on his mind. However, the aura he was radiating was becoming more and more intense by the minute. Even though Hui Yuhao was still meditating, he could sense the series of transformations occurring around him. However, he chose to ignore all of these movements. Hui Yuhao, let the 10 battles begin. Zhongli Wu announced as his low but thunderous voice traveled towards Hui Yuhao. It was only after hearing Zhongli Wu's words that Hui Yuhao finally opened his eyes slowly. At the instant when Hui Yuhao opened his eyes, Zhongli Wu felt his heart beat faster. He saw a mystical pair of eyes before him. Hui Yuhao's eyes were differently colored. One of them was a brilliant gold. Even though it did not radiate a particularly bright light, it seemed to possess the endless depth of the sun. His other eye was flickering with an azure blue light. It seemed to embody the vastness of the big blue ocean. The different colored lights in his eyes only lasted for a short while before they regained their original color. In fact, this entire transformation happened without him releasing any aura at all. However, this was sufficient to make the powerful individuals from the Sun Moon Empire wary of him. Just as Zhu Zi had put it, courage was not enough to drive a person to challenge 10 people to a battle. It was important to note that this was not the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament. There was an age limit in the tournament which usually helped to ensure that competitors were of similar ranks. However, this was a matter of life and death on the battlefield. No one would hesitate to send his or her strongest members to battle. Hui Yuhao was definitely going to be up against the most powerful individuals from the Sun Moon Empire. Even though the Death God Dolor, the Dragon Emperor Dolor, and the Sun Moon Empire's most powerful soul engineers were not present, they still possessed top-class power which even the Shrek Academy had to be wary of. Hui Yuhao floated above the ground before standing up. Following which, he turned around to nod in Tang Wutong's direction. Tang Wutong stared deeply into his eyes before stepping forward to hug him. She whispered something in his ear before walking back to where Elder Xian and the rest were. However, she did not join them, as she chose to observe Hui Yuhao from 100 meters in front of Elder Xian and the rest. Hui Yuhao stared at Zhongli Wu before looking at Zhu Zi, who was sitting in her chair. He said, "Bring it on. Let's start with the first one." When Hui Yuhao mentioned how he was ready to begin with the first one, Zhu Zi could not help but think of the time she had spent with Hui Yuhao at the Sun Moon Empire's Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy. It was then that Hui Yuhao had once challenged the powerful students of the academy. Back then, he also did not cower as he used his power and abilities to go up against those students. That was him, a powerful individual with heroic qualities, but also a soft heart. More than 10 years had passed, and he had grown to become one of the most powerful soul masters in the entire world. If he were able to win today's battle, he would undoubtedly become one of the Sun Moon Empire's biggest threats in the future. He would also naturally become a beacon of hope for the three other empires. This was destined to be a battle in which Hu Yuhao would truly become famous. Even if he were to die, he would still be a hero of the three original empires of the Doluo continent. Juzi was overwhelmed by a multitude of feelings as she kept quiet. It seemed as though she had handed the entire battle over to Zhongli Wu. Zhongli Wu let out a cold grunt as he waved his hand. A black figure launched himself forward towards Hu Yuhao from Zhongli Wu's side. This was a person who was wrapped tightly in his black cloak. There was no way one could see his appearance at all. He was like a cloud of black fog when he flew towards Hu Yuhao. His aura was rapidly becoming stronger. The power of darkness within his aura was brimming with evil vibes as it exploded like a geyser. Even though he had only flown a few hundred meters, huge clusters of dark clouds had already gathered above his head. They seemed to be swarming towards Hu Yuhao as they threatened to block all sunlight from reaching him. This person's name was Wu Yun. Even though he was not one of the 8 elders within the Holy Ghost Church, he was one of the most powerful soul masters within the Holy Ghost Church's Hall of Consecration. Actually, he was not a purebred evil soul master. He had been mistaken by others as an evil soul master and was, in fact, being hunted down by others because of his dark-type martial soul. In a fit of anger, he killed all the people who were going after him and chose to join the Holy Ghost Church. After several years of cultivation, he finally became a true evil soul master. He was one of the evil soul masters who went after the beast god with Zhongli Wu. That endeavor could be considered a huge failure, especially with the number of casualties they had sustained. However, he was the only one who managed to emerge unscathed. Similar to Di Tian, he also possessed dark-type power. When they were going after the beast god, he was able to develop a much deeper understanding of dark-type powers by sensing Di Tian's aura, as well as observing how he controlled his dark-type power. After returning from the hunt, he not only did not sustain any injuries, but also improved his soul power, and had become a transcendent Doluo. He managed to make a breakthrough past a bottleneck which had restricted his development for several years. Hence, Hu Yuhao was actually facing an evil soul master who was a transcendent Doluo for his first battle. On top of that, the evil soul master specialized in dark-type power. The dark clouds that hung over the sky rolled towards Hu Yuhao and instantly enveloped his entire body. After reaching the rank of titled Doluo, the execution of soul skills was no longer the sole deciding factor in battles. Aura, soul skills, self-created soul skills, and identifying weaknesses were all important factors which could decide the outcome of a battle. Hu Yuhao stood there without moving the whole time. He could definitely feel the immense pressure exerted on him by his opponent. In fact, this pressure felt strangely familiar. This was because the beast god was the last person to exert that much pressure on him, and helped unlock his potential. Even though this evil soul master was also skilled in dark-type power, he was a long way from matching Di Tian's powers. Dark-type powers. Hu Yuhao revealed a faint smile as the visor of his icy war god's armor descended over his face. His entire body was now fully enveloped by his armor. Following which, the icy war god's armor emanated a familiar dark blue light. The icy war god's armor was not just any armor. It was a human-shaped tool which was controlled not by Hu Yuhao's body, but by his invincible spiritual power. While Xian Ziwen was making the icy war god's armor, he had considered Hu Yuhao's impossibly strong aptitude in spiritual power, and hence adjusted the armor such that it demanded an unbelievably huge amount of spiritual power from its user. Hence, a normal human being would never be able to activate the icy war god's armor. Once he or she managed to activate it, the person would find his or her spiritual power emptied by the armor. The entire icy war god's armor was controlled by one's intent. Because of how the dark clouds had completely enveloped Hu Yuhao, he was no longer able to see anything in the dark. Even his powerful spiritual detection seemed to have been trapped in a marshy swamp of darkness. Formless pressure was surging towards him from all directions. However, would this power be sufficient to restrict Hu Yuhao? Spiritual blast? Hu Yuhao enunciated those words slowly. Even though he did not shout them, the 2,000 powerful spectators around him could hear his words audibly. Following which, everyone present felt as though their spiritual power had been influenced by Hui Yuhao's attack. Even the dark clouds that had enshrouded Hui Yuhao started to surge violently. An intense vibration started to travel through the dark-type clouds as Wu Yun started to feel a mystical energy coming into contact with the soul power he had released into those clouds. Even though his soul power was not directly affected by this mystical energy, the spiritual power he had used to control his soul power was being disintegrated by the mysterious energy. The clouds which had broken free from his control started to rise back into the sky. This strange sight resembled the mushroom clouds which usually formed after huge explosions. A figure instantly flickered from within the mushroom cloud into the sky as the dark blue light on his body gave away his identity. Yes, he was none other than Hui Yuhao. After ascending into the sky, Hui Yuhao, who was wearing his icy war god's armor, seemed like a god who was about to descend to the land of mortals. His gaze was already locked onto Wu Yun, who was now enveloped by the dark clouds. A transparent crystal at the forehead of the icy war god's armor suddenly cracked. Following which, a streak of purple-golden light was emitted as a mystical sight formed before everyone's eyes. Initially, the streak of light was purple-gold when it was just emitted. However, it gradually turned rose-gold in the air. Then, when it penetrated into the dark clouds, it mysteriously changed into a pure golden color. A streak of light was somehow able to change colors 3 times in the air. How mystical was that? A loud grunt could be heard as the dark clouds started to tremble violently. Following which, a streak of dark blue light tore across the sky as it surged into them. The dark clouds seemed to be melting like snow the moment they came into contact with the dark blue light as they disintegrated into fine black smoke that scattered everywhere. Wu Yun's figure was revealed. He was currently rapidly retreating as he started to show signs of panic. A pair of black wings had formed behind his back. However, the wings were not part of a flying-type soul tool. They were given to him by his martial soul. His martial soul was the Darkness Crow. It was dark-type martial soul, which was extremely rare. The wings behind Wu Yun's back seemed to be alive as the feathers on them emitted black lasers that intertwined to form a net in front of him. They were trying to block the streak of dark blue light that was going straight for him. Unparalleled chill, Emperor's Sword. The dark blue light just straight through the net. Even though the net did not break apart, its original black color turned dark blue. A figure silently appeared at the tip of the dark blue sword. Hui Yuhao had disappeared from the sky, and had seemed to use the sword light as a bridge to appear in front of Wu Yun. Wu Yun's movement seemed to be very messy. It was apparent that he had been affected by the blow landed on him by Hui Yuhao's Eye of Destiny. However, he was still able to retaliate. The 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 5 black rings on his body gave him the confidence that he could still retaliate against Hui Yuhao. His 6th ring, which was black, suddenly expanded as his entire body suddenly became illusory. His 6th soul skill, darkening. Even though his consciousness had been a bit blurred by Hui Yuhao's spiritual shock, he was still able to activate his abilities. Darkening would allow him to negate 70% of all physical attacks and soul power attacks instantly. However, it would also mean that he would not be able to attack in that short period of time. Wu Yun needed the 5 seconds of buffer time to shake off the effects of Hui Yuhao's previous spiritual shock. However, Hui Yuhao did not attack him at the first instant possible. Instead, he exclaimed a single word. Explode! A light flickered within the Eye of Destiny on his forehead. Following which, Wu Yun's entire body started to tremble intensely. His body, which had just started to undergo darkening, was somehow returned to its original state under the effects of the mystical spiritual blast. On top of that, a black figure also exploded out from his body. This is... After seeing this, even Zhongli Wu could not help but gasp in surprise. Is this spirit detachment? When did Hui Yuhao launch another spiritual attack on Wu Yun? Hui Yuhao naturally did not launch a second spiritual attack. He had only released his spiritual shock once. Even though it was just a single attack, the power of a spiritual shock released with the Eye of Destiny must not be underestimated. Its power was fully released in a single instant only because Hui Yuhao had feared that Wu Yun had some alternative defensive means. He had only chosen to detonate the spiritual shock when Wu Yun was injured. It was undoubtedly the best time to detonate spiritual shock right now. Wu Yun was not a soul engineer, and hence did not possess any defensive soul tools which could block spiritual attacks. Even though he was already a transcendent dueler, he was facing Hui Yuhao, whose spiritual power was on par with an ultimate dueler's. Wu Yun's body flew backward in an uncontrollable fashion. At that instant, all the characteristics of his martial soul that his body had adopted all vanished. The black image which had been ejected from his body was trying its best to return. However, why would Hui Yuhao give him a chance to do that? An image flickered as Hui Yuhao vanished once again. When he reappeared, he was at a position between Wu Yun and his spirit. Hui Yuhao swung his left hand backward, while he threw his right hand forward. A mystical vortex suddenly appeared above Wu Yun's spirit. The spirit, which was rapidly flying towards his body, suddenly stopped in mid-air. Boom! A soft sound could be heard as Wu Yun's body flew backward once again. Hui Yuhao's attack on Wu Yun's body did not seem to be particularly strong. After all, Wu Yun was already a transcendent dueler. His body was definitely stronger than any normal rare metal. Wu Yun's body flew back by about 50 meters. Even though his spirit had been detached from his body still possessed certain reflexes, which allowed him to slow himself down as he tried to regain his balance. Without looking him in the eye, Hui Yuhao faced his spirit as a light flickered across his eyes. A streak of rose gold light suddenly shot out from Hui Yuhao's eyes. It was another spiritual shock. Boom! The spirit instantly disintegrated into countless grains of light, which started to surge back towards Wu Yun's body. This time, Hui Yuhao did not try to stop them from reuniting. The spirit of a transcendent dueler was already considered very stable. Even after striking it with 2 waves of spiritual shock, Wu Yun's soul could still not be completely destroyed. Even so, his soul was definitely heavily damaged. After his spirit fused back into his body, blood started to spurt from Wu Yun's mouth and nose. He immediately lifted his head, and the hood that had covered his head fell down. His fairly good-looking face was revealed to the spectators. Other than the fact that his face was a little pale, he looked no different from any normal human being. However, he suddenly raised his hand and pointed at Hui Yuhao as though he wanted to say something. Nonetheless, he seemed to be unable to speak for some strange reason. Following which, a mystical vortex suddenly appeared behind Wu Yun. The vortex was a combination of blue and gold colors. The moment the vortex appeared, Wu Yun's body immediately took on the same combination of colors as the vortex. Boom! Wu Yun's body was instantly shattered and powderized. His already shattered soul was destroyed in this huge explosion. There was nothing left of it at all. From the start till the end of the battle, the entire process only took a short while. Wu Yun, the transcendent dueler who possessed the Darkness Crow martial soul, and the first evil soul master to represent the Sun Moon Empire, had fallen. A heavy silence fell upon everyone present as Hui Yuhao stood calmly where he was before turning around to face the Sun Moon Empire. Everyone had gone silent. Even Zhongli Wu, who had been brimming with confidence, became quiet. During the 2 hours before the battle, Zhongli Wu had made a series of plans, and Wu Yun was the first pawn he had decided to send out. Zhongli Wu was definitely able to guess what Zhu Zi had managed to guess. Hui Yuhao must have the necessary credentials to possess the courage to step forward and challenge 10 opponents. On top of that, Zhongli Wu must have tried to understand Hui Yuhao's abilities and fighting style. He knew Hui Yuhao was but a titled dueler. Hence, his plan was carefully constructed with several considerations in mind. Zhongli Wu only had a single objective for sending Wu Yun out in the first battle. He wanted to use the strength and viscosity of Wu Yun's dark-type powers to burn away Hui Yuhao's soul power. This would create opportunities for the subsequent opponents Hui Yuhao would have to face. In fact, Zhongli Wu had instructed Wu Yun to surrender when necessary. After all, it was not easy to nurture an evil soul master to a titled dueler. Furthermore, Wu Yun had just successfully become a transcendent dueler. Once he was able to consolidate his abilities, he would definitely be a huge asset to the Holy Ghost Church. A transcendent dueler had an enormous advantage over a titled dueler when it came to survivability. Hence, Zhongli Wu had planned for the first battle to be a protracted one. Even if Hu Yuhao were able to use his ultimate ice to suppress the dark clouds, he would have to exhaust a lot of his soul power and techniques in order to triumph over Wu Yun. However, little did he expect Wu Yun to perish in just a few short encounters. Even his soul had been destroyed. In fact, Wu Yun did not even have a chance to unleash his martial soul true body. He was simply killed while he was trying to probe Hu Yuhao to see what he had up his sleeves. Has Hu Yuhao really become so powerful? These thoughts fleeted in the minds of the powerful soul masters and soul engineers from both sides who were spectating the battle. As they went through the entire battle in their heads again, they realized that Hu Yuhao did not make many moves. In fact, they did not even remember seeing him release the soul rings from his body. However, his extremely powerful spiritual shock left a deep impression on everyone. A transcendent dueler was somehow unable to block his spiritual shocks, and had died because of his spiritual attacks. How strong must Hu Yuhao be in order to have pulled this off? Those who were capable of keener observations would have noticed the huge explosion which happened in the end. It seemed to be some sort of ability Hu Yuhao possessed. It was important to note that an 8-ringed soul dueler might not even be able to kill a transcendent dueler even if the transcendent dueler were to just stand there and allow the soul dueler to attack him for 24 hours straight. On top of that, Hu Yuhao did not even seem to be using any kind of soul skills. He was somehow able to kill Wu Yun with a gentle movement of his palms. Even if Wu Yun did not possess a spirit, and hence could not effectively control his body, it did not change the fact that his body was still impossibly strong, and his soul power was still present within his body. What kind of ability would allow Hu Yuhao have to achieve that feat? His yin-yang complement soul cores. This was the answer which very few people actually knew. When Hu Yuhao had planted his palm on Wu Yun's body, he had transferred his yin-yang complement soul power into his body. The soul power he had transferred was an extremely unstable vortex. To put it simply, Hu Yuhao planted a mini-soul core which drilled into Wu Yun's body. And this soul core was controlled by Hu Yuhao. The explosion of a soul core within Wu Yun's body was bound to kill him. Without his spirit to control his soul power to defend against the explosive force, he would never be able to survive no matter how strong his body was. It was important to note that Hu Yuhao's soul core not only contained ultimate ice, but also his spiritual power. Hence, Wu Yun's already shattered spirit could never have survived the explosion formed from the powerful yin-yang complement soul power. His spirit was simply destroyed. So powerful. Juzi's heart started to beat faster as she started to grasp a better appreciation of Hu Yuhao's power. No wonder he was able to pursue my 2 beast-ranked soul engineer legions with such ease. I can't believe how strong he's become. Yuhao, you really are a generational talent. You are definitely the right heir to inherit Shrek Academy. Juzi was amazed by the powers Hu Yuhao had exhibited. At the same time, she was becoming depressed. The more powerful Hu Yuhao became, the likelier he was to remain her enemy. Juzi could still remember the words Hu Yuhao had said to her earlier. If he really wanted to continue harassing the Sun Moon Empire's army, she would have no choice but to ask the Death God Doluo for help. And when that happened, it would definitely be a fight to the death. Can the second fighter please step forward? Just when everyone was staring at Hu Yuhao as though he was an actual war god, he suddenly spoke. Yes, now that the first one was dead, it was time for the Sun Moon Empire to send out their second representative. The battle had only just begun. Zhongli Wu was visibly angered by Hu Yuhao's words. After all, he had just lost an evil soul master who had just attained the transcendent Dolor rank. It had taken him many years to develop and nurture a transcendent Dolor only for Hu Yuhao to take him down so easily. Wu Yun was an evil soul master who would rank in the top 10 soul masters within the Holy Ghost Church. Wu Yun's death was completely futile. He did not even manage to showcase his abilities, and was instantly killed by Hu Yuhao when he was still trying to probe him. This was a result of him not being sufficiently familiar with Hu Yuhao as well as the explosive power of Hu Yuhao's spiritual power. He did not even manage to drain much of Hu Yuhao's power. Zhongli Wu turned around to look at Juzi before whispering, "Marshal, Hu Yuhao seems to possess extremely powerful spiritual power." We must borrow the power of spiritual defensive soul tools in order to deal with him. Hence, I need our Class 9 soul engineers to lend us a hand. Juzi immediately frowned. Zhongli Wu was able to keep his wits about him and find out where the problem lay even in such stressful situations. No wonder he was the leader of the Holy Ghost Church. That was right. In the age of soul tools, it would be extremely difficult to beat Hui Yuhao without soul tools, especially when Hui Yuhao's spiritual shock was so powerful. However, once Zhongli Wu was able to equip his people with spiritual defensive soul tools, they should be able to withstand a few blows from spiritual shock. After all, Hui Yuhao's spiritual power was limited. He would not be able to replicate his spiritual shock 10 times. Juzi was definitely unable to turn Zhongli Wu's request down when there were so many people, including evil soul masters from the Holy Ghost Church, around her. She immediately turned around to look at the soul engineers behind her before asking, "Is any of you willing to lend your spiritual defensive soul tool to the military supervisor?" There were about 11 Class 9 soul engineers behind Juzi, and all of them were top-class soul engineers within the Sun Moon Empire. More than half of the Class 9 soul engineers in the entire Sun Moon Empire were present here. However, after hearing Juzi's words, all of them kept silent. Zhongli Wu's eyes widened in rage. He was angry to find out that no one was willing to help him. Hui Yuhao was definitely not going to rush them. After all, the longer they took to send out the next person, the more soul power and spiritual power he could recover. Of course, Zhongli Wu knew this as well. Zhongli Wu gritted his teeth and exclaimed, "I will buy them." There was no time for him to lose. Considering how much he wanted the Jiangshi Ice Bear King, as well as how there was no room for failure after receiving the military order, he knew he had no choice but to buy the spiritual defensive soul tools. After running its operations for so many years, the Holy Ghost Church possessed wealth which could rival the other empires. The soul engineers present were visibly attracted by the proposition of a purchase. After a short discussion, they produced a price list before Zhongli Wu. All 11 Class 9 soul engineers were like brothers from the same mother, as they produced the exact same price list as one another. A Class 9 spiritual defensive soul tool was definitely priceless. The Class 9 soul engineers would naturally only accept rare metals as the currency of the transaction. They requested 10 types of rare metals, and 1 ton of each type of rare metal in exchange for a single Class 9 spiritual defensive soul tool. Zhongli Wu could feel his heart bleeding after seeing what the Class 9 soul engineers had quoted. Even though the Holy Ghost Church was incredibly rich, rare metals were commodities which had great strategic value. The Duskwater Alliance, which Hui Yuhao had previously joined, specialized in trading rare metals. Even though the Holy Ghost Church had the quantity of the rare metals they had quoted, it was still a substantive cost. But could Zhongli Wu say no? The value of a titled duel evil soul master was definitely a lot more than whatever rare metals they were demanding. "I will make sure all of you pay for this." Zhongli Wu gritted his teeth and agreed to the prices offered by the Class 9 soul engineers, even though he knew they were simply trying to raid him when he was out of options. He purchased a single spiritual defensive soul tool, because he had no idea how long Hui Yuhao could last against the next person he was about to send forward. Zhongli Wu was trying to buy as few spiritual defensive soul tools as possible. If he needed them again, he would buy them later. Even though the Class 9 soul engineers appeared to be very calm and collected, they were all laughing deep down. It was a pleasant feeling to see how an evil soul master was forced to accept an unfair agreement. After all, soul engineers, like soul masters, were normal people. They would naturally not have a good impression of evil soul masters. On top of that, the relationship between the Holy Ghost Church and the soul engineers was becoming increasingly strained over the past few years. Zhongli Wu regretted not bringing some of the soul engineers from his Holy Ghost Church along for this war. He had left all of them behind in the Radiant City. If not, he would not have to agree to such an unfair deal. Following which, Zhongli Wu passed the spiritual defensive soul tool he had just bought to the person beside him. "Little phone, take care. Please prioritize your safety." "Okay." The person who was standing beside Zhongli Wu was the woman he loved. She was none other than Phone Ling, the vice leader of the Holy Ghost Church. Zhongli Wu was going to send Feng Ling as Hui Yuhao's second opponent. Right from the beginning, Zhongli Wu had never planned to use all 10 battles. He did not believe that Hui Yuhao had the ability to last for 10 battles, even though he must have something up his sleeves. At the same time, he did not want to use all of his trump cards. There were more than 10 powerful soul masters from the Holy Ghost Church who had followed the army to war. Every one of them was at least a titled dueler. Other than the 2 ultimate duelers, they pretty much formed the backbone of the Holy Ghost Church. However, after their previous battle, as well as the fight against Di Qian, they had lost a couple of people. The battle against Di Qian had been exceptionally costly. Currently, they only had 9 people left, and 2 of those 9 people were heavily injured. Hence, they could at best send out 7 people. Among the 7 people, only 4 of them, including Zhongli Wu himself, were at the level of a transcendent dueler. It was extremely difficult to cultivate to become a transcendent dueler as an evil soul master. It was even more difficult to nurture one. Usually, an evil soul master would have an enormous advantage over a normal soul master even if they were at the same rank. It was not impossible for one evil soul master to fight against multiple normal soul masters. However, when it came to higher ranked battles, the advantage would gradually diminish. This video will end here.